The U.S. national anthem rang out on the scorching training field, the large flag snapping on the steel pole. Hundreds of soldiers stood at attention, eyes fixed straight ahead. But a different figure stood at the end of the line, Elena Ward. She held her posture, yet her hand gripped a worn silver dog tag, her eyes distant, as if tied to a memory no one else could reach. When the crack of leaf fire thundered across the range, she didn't charge forward. Instead, she quietly sat down. The unit stirred, whispers of mockery rippled around her. If you believe true strength never needs to boast, subscribe to Humankind Stories so you won't miss what's next. The training horn blared, followed by the pounding footsteps of hundreds of soldiers on the field. The American flag whipped in the wind beneath a bold sign bearing 3 familiar words: honor, courage, commitment. The air was thick with gunpowder, sweat, and dust, the familiar smell of any training base on U.S. soil. Staff Sergeant Elena Ward didn't stand out among the crowd. A faded uniform, hair pulled back tight, a quiet presence. But those who looked closely might notice one detail: her hand clenched around a worn silver dog tag, an old keepsake dangling from her rucksack. The rifle qualification kicked off. Shouts of "Locked and loaded!" echoed down the line, followed by the crack of the first volleys, paper targets jerking under impact. Bryce, a newly promoted young lieutenant, stepped forward with confidence. Just 26, he was hungry for a slot in special operations and knew every point today could make or break his career. To him, Elena, an older sergeant with a thick file and silent demeanor, was a threat that needed to be erased. When Elena's turn came, an odd silence settled. She raised her rifle in flawless stance, then lowered it. She sat down on the dirt, eyes closed. Her target stayed pristine. A wave of mocking whispers swept the line. "Sleepwalker!" The nickname stuck immediately, dripping with ridicule. The instructor ground his teeth, carving a red mark on the clipboard. Bryce shot her a sidelong glance, a crooked smile curling as if savoring the moment his rival dug her own grave. Next came the obstacle course: barbed wire, an 8-foot wooden wall, a bottomless sandpit, designed to break even the strong. "Hoo-ah!" the squad shouted, pushing each other forward. Mendes hauled himself over the wall with a grunt. Larson vaulted smoothly. Owen stumbled but clung on. Elena approached the wall, paused for a few seconds, then sat cross-legged in the sand, eyes closed. The clock kept ticking. Bryce's team was forced to rerun the entire course because she hadn't completed it. This time, the ridicule didn't stay verbal. Back at the barracks, Elena's locker was plastered with a sheet of paper scrawled in red: "Sleepwalker, dead weight." Young soldiers howled with laughter, pointing as she walked by. At dinner, the hall rang, and with clattering utensils, the smell of stew and bitter coffee. Elena walked in with her tray. Owen deliberately bumped her, spilling sauce onto her boots as she passed. Larson sneered, "Careful, you don't fall asleep while you eat." Bryce sat at the center table, tapping his spoon like a gavel, his voice carrying across the room. "Maybe what our squad needs is an alarm clock, not a rifleman." Laughter burst out, sharp as knives in the cramped space. Elena knelt, picked up her tray, her hand tightening around the dog tag in her pocket. Not a word in reply. But for a fleeting instant, her eyes flashed, then dimmed again. Only Master Chief Rodriguez, sitting at a far corner, noticed. The Afghanistan veteran watched how she set her tray down with uncanny precision, every motion exact, habits only forged in real combat. The next drill gave Bryce even more reason to discredit her. In a squad exercise, he deliberately assigned Elena to stand outside the tactical circle, just to observe. The team moved forward without rear cover, and the mission collapsed. When the whistle shrieked, Bryce spun, finger jabbing. "See? With Sleepwalker, the whole squad just goes down." Laughter erupted again, sharper this time. Elena remained silent, but her hand trembled faintly on the rucksack strap, her fingers brushing the tag engraved with Carter. An old promise echoed in her mind. "Stand firm, Ward. Honor must never be allowed to sleep." To her squad mates, she was a joke, but to the Master Chief, who knew what life and death looked like on the battlefield, Elena Ward wasn't asleep at all. She was waiting for a signal they didn't yet understand. At dawn, the bugle call reverberated across the barracks. Bryce's squad formed, sweat darkening their shirts though the sun had barely risen. The air reeked of powder and dust. The instructor barked, "The entire squad will rerun the obstacle course because one of you failed." The words fell like a hammer blow. Bryce clenched his jaw, eyes darting to Elena. In the U.S. military, where lives depend on each other, no one forgives the soldier who drags the team down. Mendes muttered a curse. Larson shook his head, contempt heavy. Owen said nothing, his eyes sliding away. The drill began. Boots slammed the burning ground, sweat-soaking uniforms. The wall, the sandpit, the wire, all again, like a nightmare loop. Bryce roared to keep the formation alive. Mendes strained, breath ragged. By the final line, the squad collapsed, shirts plastered to their backs. The instructor snarled, "War does not wait for the weak." His glare fixed on Elena, stoking the squad's fury. Elena rose, face calm, wiping her brow with her sleeve. Her hand brushed the silver tag again, a habit no one noticed except Rodriguez. Back in the barracks, mockery turned physical. A bright red sheet was taped across her locker. Sleepwalker, dead weight. A cluster of young troops laughed loudly as she passed. Elena quietly tore it, down, folded it, and tucked it into her pack. No complaint, no anger. That evening, the mess hall was packed, thick with the scent of strong coffee and beef stew, utensils clattering on trays. Elena carried her own, searching for a quiet corner. As she walked by, Owen shoved her shoulder. Her food clattered to the floor. Laughter rolled. Bryce stood, his voice booming, so the whole room heard. Maybe she needs a military wake-up call. Forget rifles. The hall erupted in jeers. Elena bent down, calmly gathered each piece of bread, and placed it back on the tray. She didn't respond. Her fingers traced the cold metal of the dog tag. In silence, she absorbed each laugh like a knife cut, but the steel chill of the tag reminded her of her vow. From a distance, Rodriguez watched. The veteran of cobble streets saw what the young ones could not. He noticed how Elena aligned her tray neatly, never wasting a motion. He caught the way her eyes scanned the exits as if by instinct. In his mind, a thought grew. This woman isn't incompetent. She's a spring wound tight, waiting to snap. Later, in another squad exercise, Bryce ordered Elena to stay outside the tactical circle so she wouldn't drag them down. The squad advanced without rear cover, the result, disaster. When the whistle shrieked, Bryce spun, jabbing a finger. "See, we lost because of her." The accusation hit harder than any bullet. Laughter burst from nearby squads, the humiliation spreading. Elena stood silent, but her hand trembled on her strap. Her fingers brushed the name engraved on the tag, Carter. In her mind, the voice of her fallen comrade returned. Ward, never let honor fall asleep. The barracks saw a burden, but Rodriguez saw something else, a secret locked tight. And he knew, when the day came, the truth would stun them all. The afternoon was stifling, sunlight shimmering off the ground like fire. The combined exercise was set, a mock neighborhood with wooden houses, narrow alleys, and cramped stairwells. The test, breach and rescue the hostage within 15 minutes. A long whistle blew, and soldiers took their positions. Bryce led, taut with ambition. This was the last chance to score in front of the brass. He adjusted his rifle sling, voice tightening. Today, no one is allowed to make mistakes. His eyes stopped on Elena like a warning. Mendes hefted the breaching hammer, and Larson and Owen followed close. Elena walked last, composed, her quiet eyes seeming to belong elsewhere. The first door blew apart. Bryce charged in as if victory were already in hand. Paint-round cracks snapped through the air. Owen went down instantly, his blouse blooming blue. Larson took a hit in the chest, and the alarm sounded. A round smacked Bryce's helmet. He toppled in frustrated disbelief. Only Mendes kept shouting, firing back in vain. And Elena? She sat in a dark corner, eyes half closed, fingers resting lightly on the silver dog tag. In under a minute, the whole team was eliminated. Red lights flashed, sirens wailed. The instructor slammed his clipboard onto the table, anger plain on his face. No one expected Bryce's team to fail that fast, and every eye swung back to Elena, the one still sitting, as if none concerned her. Outside the observation area, Master Chief Rodriguez stood with arms folded, brows drawn tight. He'd watched this scenario repeat too many times. Team fails, Elena motionless. Doubt rose in his chest, and he thought maybe she was broken. Suddenly, an engine sounded from a distance. A glossy black SUV slid through the gate as if it belonged. The door opened, and a man stepped out. His stride was straight and economical, his face weathered by war. His uniform was sharp and spare, no gaudy rack, only the ribbons that mattered. People immediately recognized him. Commander Jake Rohr, the SEAL legend who had led multiple covert missions in the Middle East. The atmosphere on the training ground changed at once. Instructors halted, troops whispered. In the US military, the name Rohr means absolute respect. He doesn't show up to basic training evolutions, unless there's a special reason. Rohr headed straight for the observation deck, his voice ringing firm, each word like a battlefield order. Chief Rodriguez, I'm told Staff Sergeant Elena Ward is in this cycle. Rodriguez stiffened. Yes, sir. But she's about to be dropped. Her performance? I've read the reports, Rohr cut in, his eyes fixed on the Mock City monitor. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to witness. He pulled a tablet from his pocket and tapped quickly. The red word, classified, flashed beside Elena's file. Rodriguez frowned, pulse kicking up. A layer of secrecy was beginning to peel back. She? Rodriguez hesitated. Who is she really, sir? Rohr glanced over, a thin smile flickering. Not quite amusement, more a reminder. Someone like Ward, Chief, I've seen only once before. In a place no one wants to remember. Bryce was unbuckling his helmet inside the building, face flushed with failure. When he saw Commander Rohr step into the observation bay, he flinched. The ambitious glint in his eyes flickered with worry, as if afraid he'd be measured against Elena, the very soldier he'd kept tearing down. Rodriguez drew himself up, a weight settling in his chest. He didn't know what was happening, but he knew one thing. Elena Ward was not an ordinary staff sergeant, and that would be proven with the following order. At that moment, the air on the training ground seemed to be holding its breath. Bryce was still kneeling and spent. Mendes panted. Larson and Owen were tagged KIA. Elena sat in the corner, eyes closed, fingertips on the cold silver tag. A voice cracked over the loudspeaker, hard-edged, bouncing off every wooden wall. Ward. Elena's eyes opened, her dark pupils sharpened, focus snapping from far away to absolute. Her fingertip twitched on the tag like a switch had just been thrown. Ward, Commander Rohr continued, his tone iron steady. Recall mode, execute. No one but he and Elena understood the whole meaning of that order, but in an instant, everything about her changed. From weary and detached, she came up in one clean motion, rifle seated to the shoulder, eyes locking on target. A dark shape edged out at the end of the hall. 2 paint rounds left the barrel, center mass, perfect. The opponent dropped before he could fire. Elena moved past Bryce's fallen body without a glance. Her footwork flowed, not a step wasted. On the monitors, the instructors went silent. A stopwatch slipped from a hand and hit the desk. No one took notes anymore. They only stared, as if watching something that training couldn't explain. Elena drove into the second room. 2 ambushers at the window had just leveled their weapons when she cut them both down with a paired burst. She lowered her profile and changed direction with liquid smoothness, a choreography of violence. Another enemy sprang from a blind corner, muzzle up. Her knife cleared the sheath, her body snapped, he went down in a heartbeat, and only then did she fire again. Mendes, the only one still alive, watched from the floor, stunned. Minutes earlier, he'd scorned her. Now he felt her yank him out of the line of fire and plant him safe behind the door. In his eyes flickered a rare feeling. Respect. Elena didn't stop. The wooden stairs thrummed under her boots. On the second floor, a prepared kill box waited, the kind that had wiped out other teams. But she moved as if she'd memorized the blueprint. 3 clean shots. The threat collapsed before it could coordinate. Bryce still sat on the ground, clutching his helmet, eyes glued to the figure in motion. The permanent smirk was gone. Only horror and awe remained. The last door flew open. Inside, a hostage pinned by 2 gunmen. Elena glanced once, computed angles in a single breath. 2 shots cracked, Both gunmen fell. The hostage was safe. A long whistle sounded. It was not the alarm of failure this time, but the signal that the mission was complete. The entire training complex seemed to explode into silence. People could not believe their eyes. Elena lowered her rifle, removed her helmet, breathing steady as if she'd just finished a routine drill. She turned back, lifted the hostage to their feet, and signaled clear to the observation bay. In the command room, Rodriguez was numb. He had believed Elena was dead weight. Now he saw a warrior trained to the edge of perfection, a compressed spring released with brutal force. Bryce stared at her, face drained. His mouth opened, but no words came. The whole barracks fell silent. The jeering sleepwalker that once echoed everywhere had vanished, leaving a heavy hush. Commander Rohr stood straight, his voice calm but carrying real weight. That is who she really is. Elena Ward, once the barracks joke, had become a storm no one dared underestimate. Wendy C. Debrief room was small and tight, with harsh white fluorescent light glaring down and the cold steel table reflecting every motion. Elena sat on one side, her rifle broken down into parts before her. She cleaned the barrel and reassembled each piece, her hands steady and calm, as if no transformation had occurred. Across from her, Master Chief Rodriguez stood with arms folded, eyes tracking every movement. Beside him, Commander Rohr stood straight, his face stern. They had just witnessed a storm inside the mock building, and now they needed to understand why. "Recall protocol," Rohr began, his voice decisive. "A classified program. Only a handful in this military have ever heard of it." Rodriguez frowned. "And Ward is one of them?" "Not just one of them," Rohr replied. "She's exemplary. 18 months operating in places that don't exist on maps, every mission completed, not a single teammate lost, not a single hostage left behind." He paused, looking directly at Rodriguez. "She hasn't lost her capability. She's been required to restrain it." Rodriguez turned to Elena. "Then why did you sit still? Why accept being mocked by your team, looked down on by the whole barracks?" Elena set a small piece of the rifle down, her hand lightly brushing the silver dog tag hanging at her chest. Her gaze softened, but her voice carried, even and firm. "Because I wasn't allowed to." The room fell silent. "The protocol requires us to lock it down," Elena continued. "We're trained to wait for the right signal. If I act on my own, I could trigger at the wrong time, and that mistake could get my own teammates killed." Rodriguez looked at the silver dog tag in her hand. "That belongs to who?" Elena's eyes flickered, then she spoke quietly. "His name was Carter, the only one who believed in me on my first mission. The last time, he shoved me into a shelter when the grenade went off. I lived, he didn't. This tag is all that's left." Her fingers tightened around the worn metal, pain long unhealed lighting in her eyes. "I promised him I would hold the line on discipline to the end. I would never let his sacrifice become meaningless. That's why I stayed silent. That's why I endured." Rodriguez grew pensive, his gaze hardening. He had lost teammates in Afghanistan. He knew what a final battlefield promise meant. And now he realized Elena wasn't nodding off. She was carrying an oath heavier than any verbal order. Rohr looked at Rodriguez, his tone slow but sure. "Chief, she's not just a soldier. She's a keeper of a promise, at any cost." Rodriguez stayed quiet for a long moment. Finally, he gave a slight nod. The doubt that had weighed on him dissolved, replaced by respect. Elena snapped the last piece into place, and the metallic clicks were steady and even. She set the fully assembled weapon on the table, engaged the safety, eyes down, voice low but clear. "I don't do this for me. I do it for my team, honor, and the freedom we fight to protect." Silence filled the room again, but this time, it wasn't the silence of suspicion. It was the silence of recognition. Outside, Bryce and the younger soldiers sat quietly. They had mocked her, blamed her. Now, all they could do was replay the image of Elena tearing through the room, dropping the enemy, pulling Mendes out of danger. And they understood. She had never been weak. She was loyal to a promise, one etched into an old piece of metal. Graduation day unfolded under a clear blue sky, strong wind driving the American flag high on the pole. The formation stood at attention, uniforms crisp, boots thudding in unison. Instructors called names and handed out certificates. Each met with a steady hoo-ah. Elena Ward stood in that formation too. Not different, not conspicuous. Hair neat, eyes forward. But those who had seen what happened knew. Behind that calm surface was a strength that had stunned the entire barracks into silence. When the ceremony ended, Bryce walked over. He held his helmet in his hand, his steps uncertain. For the first time, the usual arrogance was gone. He stood straight, face set. "Ward," his voice caught. Elena answered briefly. "You don't need to know. It's not your fault. We have different missions." The simple reply was enough for Bryce to grasp how deep the distance ran between yesterday's mockery and today's truth. Mendes, Larson, and Owen, the loudest voices before, now sat quietly in the mess. When Elena entered, the laughter was gone. Instead, a young private stood, pulled out a chair, and invited her to sit. Elena smiled slightly, but shook her head and chose her corner. That brief moment showed the shift, from outcast punchline to model worth emulating. Rodriguez watched it all. He had survived many battlefields, had seen cocky rookies crumble, and had also seen those who carried something no one else could understand. With Elena, he no longer had doubts. In his report up the chain, he added a short line. "Recommend consideration for commendation for steadiness and loyalty, though mission details remain classified." He knew few besides senior leaders would ever read it, but it was the only way to defend her honor. The day Elena left the barracks, the black SUV returned, quiet as when it first arrived. No ceremony, no applause, only a few lingering looks, a mix of respect and hesitation. Bryce stood at a distance, helmet in hand, but didn't step forward. Mendes gave a subtle nod. Larson said nothing. Owen stared at his boots, not brave enough to look up. Elena climbed into the vehicle, rucksack on her shoulder, hand still wrapped around the worn silver tag. But before the door closed, she paused. She looked up at the American flag whipping in the wind, her eyes brightening instantly. In that moment, she whispered, "For everything we fight for." The SUV rolled away, dust rising and dissolving in the morning sun. Elena Ward disappeared as she had arrived, quietly, without fanfare. But those who had mocked her would never forget. They had lived beside a silent warrior, someone who kept a promise with her whole life. The story of the Sleepwalker would not appear in public reports and would earn no medal or speech. It would live only in the memories of those who witnessed it, memories strong enough to change how they saw strength, honor, and loyalty. One question still hung in the quiet. How many other sleepwalkers are out there? People who look ordinary, even weak, yet carry a power waiting to be called by name. As the sun climbed higher, the wind kept the American flag flying, a reminder that true strength doesn't need display. In America, we honor the unsung heroes. If you believe those unsung heroes deserve to be remembered, join us at Humankind Stories. Subscribe, share, so this flame never goes out.